What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Crossover U podcast, brought to you right here on the Crossover channel. My name's Kanaye, and I'm joined with Josh. And I know it's been a little while since we've brought you guys a video, but life tends to get busy a lot of times. We had finals that we had to do, so that was that. Now that it's all done, we're going to be bringing you guys more content going forward. But obviously, a lot to talk about right now in college basketball in terms of draft decisions. A lot of guys are on the fence right now as to whether they will come back to school for another season of college basketball or stay and keep their name in the NBA draft, which a lot of them have gone through the combine in the last few days, and they're going through the process of talking to GMs and higher ups with NBA teams and getting some feedback as to where they would be picked or where they need to improve in their own personal basketball game and ability. But we're going to talk about some of those guys just because I think a lot of the guys who are in the draft right now, but have maintained their college eligibility for a potential return, I think a lot of those guys' decisions are going to have drastic effects on how this upcoming college season plays out. I think the number one guy, which we'll start here with, is Yaxel Landenborg. I should say. He's committed to Michigan, but he's going through the draft process. He's a guy who I believe would probably go in somewhere in the realm of picks 20 through 30. But he has a really tough decision to make. I know he's came out and said that he's leaning towards Michigan 60-40. Since then, he's came out and said it's a lot closer than that now. But again, a really unique situation that he's in where he's going to be making a lot of money in Ann Arbor if he goes to Michigan next year and put Michigan in a chance to compete for a Big Ten title and make some noise in the NCAA tournament. But if he doesn't, then Michigan's kind of in scramble mode. If we're being honest, their roster isn't all too great without Yaxel. So definitely a decision that's going to have a big impact on that program. Josh, I'm going to ask you, if you're advising Yaxel, what do you tell him?
I mean, according to what he has told us, it's a 60-40 decision on returning to college versus going into the NBA. And I might flip it a little bit. I get it that he has a great opportunity to jump into the lottery next year. But at the same time, it really depends on who and what you want, both from the team that you're going to get drafted by, but also the team that you're leaving. And, staying at Michigan is not a bad idea. Keep in mind his original university, UAB, high mid major, but just not really something like a Michigan. He has Dusty May as a great coach. You've seen how Danny Wolf was transformed into a very likely lottery pick. There's a great reason for him to stay. And he could definitely get enough money to overprice a rookie contract from really any team. I don't know what team is really looking for him, but his draft combine looked great. He was taller than expected. He played better than expected. He fit really well. I mean, the guy can definitely fit in the NBA right now. I think it's definitely a coin flip, but I definitely see where he's coming from. Personally, if I were Yaxel, I would probably go to the NBA because it's just probably the best choice to do it now than to take the risk. But at the same time, there's no shame in coming back. I mean, there'll be a lot of happy Michigan fans that would buy your jersey and fill up your NIL deals in an instant.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough decision that he has to make. There's no guarantee that you're going to be picked in the same spot if you come back to school for one more year and enter your name into the draft the following season. And if we're being honest, he probably is going to go in the first round right now. I have a tough time seeing him falling out of the top 30. Of course, there's always a chance that happens. I personally don't see it. I think a lot of GMs believe he's going to go in the round of 20 to 30. Now, I know he's come out and said that he didn't choose Michigan because of the money. He chose it because of player development, the coaches, and how much he really trusts them, trusts Dusty May and his staff. Now, let's be honest here. The money is a factor, whether he wants to admit it or not. He's probably going to be making like $3 to $4 million in NIL next season. But yeah, I mean, you do have to take into account that he really does trust Dusty May and the coaching staff at Michigan. And you have to look at what they did. You mentioned Danny Wolf, Josh. Danny Wolf was a guy at Yale who, let's be honest, if you weren't an avid college basketball watcher, you probably didn't know who he was till this past year, where he balled out of Michigan and played himself into being probably a top 20 pick in this year's draft. I think if you're Yaxel, you take a look at that and see, hey, I'm valued at a first round pick right now. if I come back and have a really, really good year where I reach an All-American status, try to win a Big Ten title with Michigan, make some noise in March, I could play myself into being a lottery pick next draft. And I think that's the best thing for him to do. Come back, prove that you can play at the high major level, which we haven't seen you done yet, which I definitely think he's going to be able to do. He's definitely in the running, I think, for preseason Wooden Award. In my eyes, he's definitely belong up there with the likes of uh, JT Toppin and Braden Smith, in my opinion. And I definitely think he's going to ball out in Ann Arbor next year if he comes back to school. So if I was him, considering the bagger to be making an NIL money, the chance for player development with that coaching staff, and just the ability to win at Michigan, a program that's kind of on the comeback right now. Dusty made a really good year this past season in his first year at Michigan. He's definitely building on that. And you come back, you got a team that's really going to need you, and you're going to be the go-to guy. So I don't see why you don't come back.
No, I 100% agree. But, it's definitely his decision. Honestly,
Right.
it's really any major player's decision. I mean, we've seen this before a ton of times. Caravan was one of the bigger guys last year who was considering it, came back. He actually did it again this year. So I think that's very entertaining to see that. And I think big talk here is how NIL is giving players the opportunity to have almost a free year in coming back because they can make the money that they would make in the NBA and then go into it anyway the next year. Because, 5-10 years ago, we wouldn't have this discussion about if Yaxel would go to the league or not. Yaxel would not have even transferred. He would just went straight up.
Yeah, exactly.
Caravan would have left. We would have seen guys like Boogie Fland leave. Most of the guys testing would have just ended up going, and even if they don't get drafted, an undrafted free agent still a better option than an additional year in college that probably won't result in you being drafted again. So if you're going to ask me, big talk right now is just if you can offer the money, then there's no need to ever leave.
Most definitely. I mean, that again, like we've talked about so much on this podcast, and anyone who covers college basketball has talked about it. NIL has completely changed the game. It's made it so that some of the household names, the big name players in the sport, come back for another season instead of going pro, maybe too early. I think it does a lot for player development. I think it does a lot for the sport too, getting more people to continue to return and watch their favorite players play. So we mentioned Yaxel Landenborg having major implications surrounding his draft decision. The rest of the guys on this list, really no different. I think really big one, next name I want to throw out there is Darrion Williams. Obviously played at Texas Tech this past year, was really good with JT Toppin and that crew. They went on a nice little run in the NCAA tournament. If he comes back, Texas Tech, I think, has a chance to be a top 5 team in the preseason in my eyes. And he is, I believe, in the portal, but he is heavily considering a return to Texas Tech if he does pull his name out of the draft. If I'm him, come back to Texas Tech. You're going to be playing with JT Toppin. I know you might not be the number one guy, but I think a lot of times sometimes it's better to play with the guy who might be getting more attention on the scouting report than you, as it's going to open stuff up for you both offensively and defensively. Texas Tech has made some nice moves in the portal. I would come back to school and I would run it back at Texas Tech if I was him. But of course, any program around the country would love to have a guy of that caliber, and he's a guy that's going to command a big bag in NIL. But again, he has a decision to make. Either he stays in the draft or comes back to school. If I'm him, I'm coming back to school. Josh, I'll ask you, if you're him, what do you choose?
I think this is another, tough decision. Maybe not as tough as Yaxel. I think Yaxel honestly just has the hardest decision out of pretty much anybody, maybe besides Cedric Coward. But I think for Watkins, Flannery decided, but I think the best option for a lot of these guys is to just stay. One more year doesn't hurt you, especially when you gain more money than a rookie contract. And you're starting on a team, you're getting a lot more name recognition, you get a lot more opportunities. I think it definitely allows you to play into a better spot next year. It works. It's bearing fruit, definitely. So, I think this really just goes for anybody we're going to talk about today, other than, I guess, really just Yaxel. Stay. The best option is just to stay.
Yeah, if I'm being honest right now, there's probably only It depends. There's two and a half, three guys on this list that I think should go. One of those being RJ Lewis. I think RJ Lewis should go. I just think he's really done everything he can in college outside of, advance far in the NCAA tournament. I mean, he was Big East Player of the Year this past season, had a really good year at St. John's. Obviously, we know what went down with Rick Pitino benching him in the second round game and him deciding to put his name into the portal. I really think he put as a very, very worst case scenario option for him to have. I believe he's fully committed to the draft process. He played really well in the combine over the last few days. And I honestly think that he's a guy who some teams might honestly value him as being good enough to take in the late first round. And I honestly think he's going to be able to carve out a role for himself in the NBA. He has great positional size on the wing. He's lengthy with the long wingspan. He's an athlete. I mean, really talented athlete, and he's showcased he's a 3-level scorer. Needs to improve on the 3-point jump shot a little bit, just consistency wise. But I think he's an NBA player. I think he should stay. I just think at this point in the process, there's a lot of teams who, might be able to pay you the money that you're deserving, just considering the market that RJ Lewis is going to demand if you were to come back to school. But if we're being honest, I really don't think a lot of those teams are all too good or will be all too good next year. Just consider a lot of teams are kind of holding out to see if they can pay guys which they already kind of have their mind settled on. So if I'm RJ Lewis, I go to the NBA. I stay in the draft, keep my name in it. I know you as a pretty big St. John's basketball watcher. I'm curious as to your opinion on the whole RJ Lewis situation.
I probably also agree with you. I mean, he was something I've pretty much already listed off my brain. Like, I knew he was going to the draft long before he even made the decision. It sucks that it had to end that way, and that, if he did come back, which is not out of the possibility, I don't see him ever going back to St. John's, but there's a big open market for him. Florida talked about having him. I'm sure Kansas would love him. Duke probably would have open spots if Cedric Coward doesn't go. So he has places to go back to, but he is a first round pick. He is more of a convincing first round pick in my mind than a guy like Yaxel. And if anything, he can play his way into the late lottery if he really wants to. He's just a junior, so he's not like super old in terms of NBA standards. So I can definitely see him filing that line. That said, would love if he came back, but we don't live in fantasies around here. So
Yeah, and to talk, kind of switch the narrative back to guys who I think should stay in school. Otega Oweh. I'm sorry, just in terms of feedback I've heard that NBA teams have put out about Otega, they don't value him as a top 40 guy. It's unfortunate because he is a really, really talented player, amazing college player. I just don't think that the consistency in the 3-point jump shot is there yet. I also think we need to see him prove it a little bit more and being able to execute Kentucky's offense more in the half court as opposed to last year where they were so reliant on their transition game and kind of shut down once things got into the half court. But you're coming back to a Kentucky team that's super talented. If you come back, they're probably top 5 preseason team. You have so many dudes who can go and make a play on their own off the dribble, which does concern me a little bit, but that's maybe a topic for another video in terms of having too many mouths to feed on that Kentucky team. But again, you're going to be the guy in Lexington next year if you come back. You're already proven you had that streak of, I forget how many consecutive 20-point games. But you're going to come back, maybe be, my pick for SEC preseason player of the year, probably a lot of others too, and have a chance to be a first-team All-American next year, make a lot of money at Lexington, and maybe add some, try to carve out a legacy as one of those guys in the illustrious history of Kentucky elites. But yeah, if I'm Otega Oweh, I come back to school.
Yeah, no, I've personally, I don't know. I think Otega Oweh is worth a early to mid second round pick, and I think that if he does want to suck it up and go second round, I would do that. It's just hard because it's Kentucky. The roster spots fill very quickly, and while Oweh was a huge part of last year's team, and obviously there is that desire to reach past the Sweet 16, which I think they definitely can do this year, I don't know. I'm more actually leaning towards him staying in the draft. I mean, I think as we've learned recently, and if you're more of an NBA guy like I am, you know that the second round is still very important. And there's a lot of guys every year that do fall into the second round that are still probably worth more than most first rounders. So I think Oweh is in that category in my mind. I just don't know if the combine showed his talents well. That said, definitely up to him. It's more of those 60-40, 50-50 decisions that we can see, but I this is one of the few I would also say to stay in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely hear you out, what you're saying there. Um, I mean, again, you're not guaranteed to get drafted if you come back to school for another year. You obviously get a year older, which NBA teams don't like. But again, I just think Kentucky is going to be really, really good next year if Otega comes back.
Yeah, Otega Oweh would be probably the nail in the coffin for an SEC completely dominated
Yeah.
by Kentucky. Kentucky would be a top five team in
Right.
an instant with arguably one of last year's best players in general on a roster at Lexington. I just don't know how else to put it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
I know what you mean.
I mean, it wouldn't shock me. That's the most I'll say.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm there with you there for sure. And to stay in the SEC with these last few guys, Tahaad Pettiford's one. This is a guy who all year long I did not understand how teams were not valuing him as a lottery pick. I mean, I understand he's undersized. His combine measurement came in. He's what, 6 foot 6'1"? I forget.
Yeah, yeah,
I won't lie. I thought he was 6'2", 6'3". So that's definitely shocking to me and definitely concerns me a lot for the sake of his draft value. Just because that was a player that I loved watching this past year. I mean, so good. A guy from Jersey City. So I definitely have to, someone who lived in Jersey City for a long time, definitely have to give him his flowers for putting on for the city there. But yeah, I mean, again, he just so dynamic what he could do off the dribble and off the ball. When he's kind of in the scenario where he is handling the ball and being the kind of go-to guy in situations this past year for Auburn. There's a lot of games, big games that Tahaad showed up in that he won for Auburn. And I just think the shot making ability is there. And no matter how tall he is, I think he's worth taking in the lottery. And I know he has had a really, really good showing in the combine. I think he had a game with 25 points, I want to say. And I know teams are actually really starting to kind of turn their heads. It's kind of flipping the narrative around his draft stock. So I definitely think there is a good chance that Tahaad can sneak into the late lottery, and if not, be a pick in between 15 to 20 at latest the 20 to 30 range. But I definitely do think he goes in the first round. While I would love to see him come back for another year of college basketball, I think he should stay in the draft. I think if he's hearing feedback wise, he's going to be a guaranteed first round pick. I think you stay. Just because I think his shot making ability and just what he can do off the dribble, I think his game kind of is more suited for the NBA than it is college, if I'm being totally honest. You're also considering his production. Probably, I mean, it's tough because you would think it would go up with him being kind of the returning guy from this past year's Auburn program. But now you have to remember you have Keyshawn Hall there and some of the other JUCO D2 transfers that Auburn's picked up. It could have gotten a little bit crowded in the scoring column. But again, as much as I would love to see Tahaad return to college, I think you stay in the draft if you're guaranteed to be a first round pick.
yeah. No, I couldn't agree any less. It's. I mean, the decision is just hard for a lot of guys nowadays. Like I said before, NAL makes the decision very open, and if you're not a top prospect freshman or a guy who's really blown up in 1 year, it kind of leaves you in a spot where you could come back. You're offered a bag. You're offered a starting roster spot with boatloads of minutes to play with, or you can take the what's now becoming a riskier choice in going into the NBA, which you might not start. You might not even be on the team. You might be in the G League for all you know for most of your starting years. And it kind of sucks because part of the I guess pride and joy of college basketball is watching these players go into the NBA, and to have that kind of be taken a little bit is a bit of a shame. But when once again, if your time isn't right, then there's now a far better opportunity to stick around. But I guess on the point you're trying to make, the Hod, I think the Hod should stay. I mean, his scrimmage was amazing. I mean, we've seen shorter players still manage to stick in. I mean, there's guys that just fill that role despite their height. I mean, Donovan Mitchell, he kind of has that like style of play that I can totally see him becoming. I don't know if he'd ever start in his rookie year, regardless of where he goes, but he's worth a first rounder. He is definitely worth a first rounder as of right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I do not understand how it took NBA teams so long to realize how much talent's there. And it makes you really wonder if the NBA teams really do watch college basketball or not, because I swear some of these teams, that their talent evaluation is terrible, if I'm being...
I've been convinced that they don't for years now.
Yeah, I mean, these guys bank so much on potential off tape that really honestly shows none. And a lot of these guys they bank on reaching a certain point, they just never get there. And I mean, you got a guy who's proved it in big games like Tahaad. I'd say you take the risk on that over a guy who really hasn't shown you anything actually on film yet. And you're just banking on how much they could potentially do in the NBA, which sometimes it works out. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt there, but a lot of times it doesn't. But hey, that's maybe a topic for another day. I lied about the rest of the guys being the SEC. Have to talk about Cedric Coward. I know Josh has mentioned him a few times. He's the other guy that I think should stay in the draft. I know there's some rumors that he could go in the first round, late first round. If that's the case, I definitely think he should go. But I also think very much, even if he is in kind of the 30 to 40, 45 range, even then, I still think he should stay in the draft just because I think a lot of what it is right now surrounding his name is he's had pretty solid showing at the combine. And he only played 5-6 games this past year, I believe. And, he showed a lot of great film in playing in the WCC at Washington State. And before at East Washington, I believe it was. But I'm kind of being a hypocrite here, but I know I just talked about teams banking on guys' potential, but I think a lot of what NBA teams are seeing with Cedric Coward is the ability for growth. With him not being too much of an older player right now, if he comes back to school, there's obviously the potential that he plays his way into being a guaranteed first-round pick if he has a really good year in Durham at Duke for John Shire this upcoming year if he stays in school. But at the same time, again, you're not guaranteed to keep your draft position if you go back to school for another year. And I definitely think if he's guaranteed to go in the first round right now, he should definitely stick it out in the draft and just hope for the best. Just considering, again, a lot of teams are banking on his potential to room for growth right now. You come back to college, you lose a year of that, and teams are now going to have a full up-to-date year of film on you. So yeah, there might be some good in there, but there also might be a lot of bad, which I'm not saying in any way to slight Cedric Coward. He's a really, really talented player and a guy who I think fits perfect on Duke. And I think he's going to be awesome there if he stays in school. But if we're talking about him wanting to capitalize on his potential, being a pro basketball player and making it to the NBA, I think he should probably go right now.
Yeah, no, he's a guy like Yaxel Landenborg that I would consider. I mean, Michigan and Duke are prime schools to want to stick around. And for Duke, he's their only real transfer.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes you wonder what Shire's doing. I mean, he is keeping the majority of his guys, but I just don't know. Like, there has to be enough money to definitely pay for Coward to come back, but Coward's looking more and more like a first round pick, or at worst a late or an early second round pick. Which, like, if you're gonna get drafted in that 25 to 35 range, it might be worth considering that. But once again, his role on this Duke team next year would be huge. It would be probably I'm kind of forgetting. I'm blanking on the name now. Of course, Tyrese Proctor. Yes, it would be a lot like a Tyrese Proctor, where Proctor's probably going to get drafted in the first round as well. By the way, and he could have went the year before when he was in Baylor. Obviously, he chose not to and transferred to Duke. A good decision by him. But if anything, he can fill that like older, but not too old style of playmaking where he can guide the Boozer brothers and the younger players that are filling the role, because this team doesn't really have a lot of
Yeah,
older
I mean,
talent.
I feel like
They're
he
losing
really could end up
Vincent
being a
Gillis,
juiced up
Sion
version of
James,
What
and
Sion James
that
was
like
this past year,
older apparatus that
where
Shire needs if he wants to get back to a natty. So I don't know. It's one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, no, I definitely hear your points there. Like I just said, I mean, I could see Sion. I mean, my mistake. Cedric being a juiced up version of Sion, maybe the Michael Jordan of Sion James's, but of course in a much bigger role than what Sion was this past season. Just considering you're not playing with the likes of Cooper Flag, Conkinipple, come on, Maluwatch, and Tyrese Proctor staying in the draft, I believe. But you're bringing back Isaiah Evans, and I'm sure Duke. I know Cedric. He's communicating with the Duke staff. Duke knows where his head's at in terms of whether he's staying or going, and what he's leaning towards. And I'm sure they're preparing for the very real possibility that he keeps his name in the draft and doesn't come back, and never plays a game at Duke. But like if he comes back, I think he's gonna be really good at Duke. Like I've talked about in the video I made about his commitment to Duke, I think that fit is awesome. I think he's gonna be great in Durham. But again, if I'm Cedric, I probably stay in the draft. Now these next two guys we want to talk about, really interesting, both kind of surrounding one team's chance to go and win a national title next year. Or I should say repeat, because we were talking about some guys who are rumored around the Florida Gators program. Those two guys being Alex Condon, Boogie Fland. We'll get to Boogie Fland. Let's start with Alex Condon. Now, I personally think he should come back, just considering that I think it's still very fresh in the minds of NBA scouts and GMs about Josh, who kind of reminded me about it before we start recording, the injury history he has. I mean, he got hurt in the SEC tournament 2 years ago, really brutal injury, was able to come back, later in the year this year, or I think he even sustained an injury at one point this year. But that on top, and then to add to that, if we're being honest, he didn't have a good tournament whatsoever. He made some big plays when they really, really needed it. But if we're being honest, stats wise, not a great tournament out of Alex Condon. And I mean, again, NIL's changed everything. You come back, you're going to be making a lot of money. Todd Golden has come out and said that Alex Condon knows the number. The decision's up to him as to whether he wants to go pro or stay in school for another year, run it back with the Gator boys out in Gainesville. But I think you also have to consider, some people talk about Tommy Howe becoming kind of the All-American on that team. I definitely am in that boat, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. That's another segment we have coming up. But with him possibly playing the 3, Alex kind of can come back, play the 4. Ruben Chinelli would be the 5. And I think, that's a really amazing front court to have right there. And I think the opportunity to show teams that you can be healthy for a full year, 1, and then 2, you can come back and have a really good SEC regular season the way you did last year, build off of that, and come back and have a better tournament than what you did this past year. Not saying you have to come and win a national championship just because it's so hard to go back to back, but showcase teams you can show up in March, play your way into being a late first round pick. Because, there is the realm of possibility he does go in the first round this year, but I think that's kind of starting to go down more and more. But yeah, if I'm Alex Condon, I would probably come back. I forget, if Josh has any differing ideas on that. I'll throw it to you.
I actually do differ. We've mentioned this in conversation as well. Like, I like Condon, and I get it. We've had discussions about how Thomas Howe is supposed to play the 3, which, if Condon comes back, it's a very tall lineup. It's a very durable lineup. I think it's one that could be really well used, especially if they go into the portal and they gain a little bit more, which there's still opportunities to do that. That said, I think Condon is more of an NBA player than he is a college player. I think it kind of showed with how he didn't really perform too well in the tournament, but he has these abilities that more or less fit the NBA. I don't know how he will compare, per se, to previous guys like him. I don't really have an exact 1-1. But like this is more of a confident pick for me. He's more like how I'm viewing like an RJ Lewis. If he comes back, I'm not particularly surprised, I guess, but I just don't really know why he would want to, even though yes, back to back is 100% in the picture and probably be sky high the second he would return. But Condon is probably, I would view Condon as a late first rounder. He's kind of in that same viewpoint as a Cedric Coward, RJ Lewis. I see a lot of these guys as like somewhere between that 20 and 40 gap, but more towards like 30 in the middle per se. Like if you're the first pick of the second round, that's nothing to be annoyed about. And I think I could see Condon's like being in that realm. I don't think he would start once again on really any NBA team, but I don't know. I would just go. I think it's in this scenario, he's more fit for the NBA than he would be for Florida. But like I said before, not against him coming back. Really, it would be really cool. I think it would be a really cool thing to see.
Yeah, I mean, those are all fair points. I definitely think Alex Condon is worth a late first round pick as it is right now. But I do think you have to consider, I think him and Thomas Howe are both in the same boat where they could play themselves into being late lottery picks next year. Just considering they're both going to be in much bigger roles next year without the likes of having to play with Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, Will Richard, Denzel Aberdeen. You know, they're going to have the ball a lot more next year. Or maybe not, because the last guy we want to talk about in terms of important draft deadline decisions, he actually did already announce his return. He will be returning to college basketball, play another year. He is in the portal and will not be returning to Arkansas. That is Boogie Fland. He's probably, if we're being honest, a top 3 transfer in the portal right now. Um, in terms of guys who are officially like in the portal coming back to college. And honestly, if think we're sticking it out in Gainesville in terms, at least for me, in terms of guys, in terms of best fit for him, I think Boogie Fland would just fit in Florida so well. You need to replace a lot in the backcourt, losing, like I just talked about, Elijah Martin, Walter Clayton Jr., and Will Richards. You got Xavier Lee. You get Tommy Howe playing the 3, so you know that brings you a different skill set there. But you kind of need another guy. I definitely think, and Boogie Fland would be that. I've heard rumors that Florida was willing to give Boogie Fland $7 million. I definitely think that was made up because that's just ridiculous. That there's no chance because one, they didn't want to pay Des Claude, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. But if we're being honest, he'd probably command $2 to $3 million in NIL, and I think he's worth it. Just considering that, I definitely do think Boogie Fland is an NBA player. He's just probably one of those undersized college guards that you tend to see who plays 2 to 3 years in school and then still ends up being an NBA player, carving out a role and playing a long career. Now, if I'm him, I choose Florida. I definitely think it was the right move to go back to school, if I'm being honest, just because I feel like he's a guy who, yeah, probably would have went in the first round this year, but can definitely play himself into being a lottery pick next year if he has a really productive season. But yeah, I think Florida is the best place to go if I'm Boogie.
I mean, I can obviously see it too. Market is once again shrinking, so he kind of has to decide fast. That'd be a nice place. Not against Duke. I mean, just once again, it's any place that has a roster. Kansas, I mean, throw in all the big names while you have the chance. But if he wants to stay in the SEC, he might as well go to Florida, unless another team really has the bag that they want to throw at
I
him.
would throw. I don't know if they have enough remaining in their budget to get him, but I would throw Tennessee into the mix, just considering how
Tennessee's a reasonable one, yeah.
Tennessee, but between Jacoby Gillespie, Nate Ament, and Boogie Fland, that is a crazy backcourt wing trio to have.
Yeah, that's probably another 2 seed for Tennessee if they
Yeah,
get their ass.
I mean, I've heard Gonzaga and Kansas are both in the mix for Boogie. I kind of like the fit at Gonzaga. I don't like the fit at Kansas just because I feel like you need to let Darren Peterson be that guy and rock out on his own. Kansas does need to do a little bit more in the portal, put some talent around Darren Peterson. I don't think you get Boogie Fland just because I think Darren Peterson and Boogie Fland are both guys who need the ball in their hands a lot in terms of being I mean, I think Darren Peterson's kind of a score first mentality type of guy. Boogie Fland kind of is that right now, but has a little more playmaking than Darren Peterson is coming in with, I believe. Again, I just think you let Darren Peterson rock out in Lawrence, and I think Boogie Fland stay away from Kansas. But like you mentioned, I think Duke would be a good fit if Cedric Coward doesn't come back. Tennessee, like I just said, I think could be a really dangerous trio. But if we're being honest, I think Gainesville is by far the best fit for me.
Yeah, I definitely see it. I definitely see it.
Which now I kind of want to get into this next segment here because originally I kind of thought like no way, but you have to remember the transfer portal exists. Teams are going to make moves. Guys are going to announce whether they're running back for another year or not. You get some added talent. Florida's done a lot. I think primarily retention. Getting Tommy Howe back was big. Ruben Chiniglu running it back. They're getting Clavzar back as well to come off the bench. You know, he's a guy who lit up from three during SEC play. Kind of came out of nowhere doing that. And you add Xavier Lee, who was one of the best point guards in the portal this past offseason cycle. Now, I definitely come out and express my concerns about Xavier Lee kind of being the go-to ball handler, do-it-all kind of guy on this team, just considering he's coming out of the Ivy League. You don't know how mid-major guys play at the high major level until you actually see them play. But if they are able to get both Alex Condon back, along with being able to land Boogie Fland in the transfer portal, how legit is Florida's chances to go back-to-back?
I would say they have better odds of going back to back than I don't. Okay, maybe not UConn. I don't want to say that UConn team was anything less than a open open carpet to go back to back, but they're probably on the way to being that point. Like, I mean, like I said before, it's a tall starting five. It's a very well experienced team. They've all had that experience of winning a ring. I get it. There's not going to be that Walter Clayton figure to, lead and be that clutch guy. But we're seeing how you can replace most of a team. But if you keep a couple guys around, if you keep the same structure, it's kind of a weird ship of Theses type of idea. But I don't know. I mean, it's more like a 1 to 5 chance. Like I'm not gonna say they're like a favorite. Like I think even if we had Boogie Fland and Condon come back, I still think that they probably wouldn't be preseason number 1, just given the amount of talent we're looking at right now.
Right.
But if any of them go to Florida, they're a top 5 team. I'm not denying them. I still think Kentucky's probably the best team in the SEC right now, but Florida makes it very, very close. If not the head of the SEC snake, which once again, SEC is going to probably be the best conference. You're going to want to be the best team in the best conference. And if Florida can be in that scenario, a back-to-back it's probably in the cards, if you're going to ask me.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, I'd have a tough time disagreeing with you saying the SEC is going to repeat as being the best conference across the country. I definitely think if they both get Condon back and land Boogie Fland in the portal, I mean, they're in a really, really good spot. I very much do feel two things are very similar across this upcoming Florida team if those two things happen and what was UConn 2 years back. Just in terms of you have a guy, I mean, I kind of look at the Thomas Howe situation very similar to Donovan Clingan, where Donovan Clingan was a guy who came off the bench, kind of was there to provide a spark, a little bit of bench scoring, make some tough plays defensively in his freshman year. And that already was enough to get him valued as being a late lottery pick to, late first round pick. But he decided to run it back for one more year in school to play himself into being a lottery pick. And Thomas Howell's in the exact same situation, I think. And I honestly believe Thomas Howell will be the All-American kind of go-to guy. Maybe not go-to, but best player on this Florida program next year. Even with the likes of dynamic scores like Xavier Lee, Boogie Fland. But I just think it also reminds you kind of the ways of, okay, take Steph Castle out of the equation here, but maybe you don't have the best individual, isolation defenders on their own. but you have so much size that it doesn't, it doesn't hurt your chances of being a good defensive team all too much. Xavier Lee has, solid height, 6'4". Boogie Fland's a little bit shorter, but again, between Tommy Howe, Alex Condon, Ruben Chinilu, that's a huge lineup to have. And you're going to have a lot of rim protection. You're going to have a lot of length, and that's going to make it really difficult for teams to score on you. And again, I think they honestly do have a really, really good chance to run it back and win another natty if they can get Condon back out of the draft and land Boogie Fland in the portal. And honestly, yeah, I don't hate your take saying that on paper, this team might honestly look like they have a better chance to repeat than UConn did 2 years ago.
No, I don't want to be offensive. I still think that UConn team had it all set. But
Yeah, I mean,
Thomas Howe, you have a really strong point with the Thomas Howe connection to Dominic Klingon. I could see it.
yeah, I mean, I think Thomas Howe is really, really talented. He showed what he could do as a glue guy. Now imagine what he can do kind of as, again, I don't know if number one option is the right word, just because you have so many so many scores on this team going to next year, especially if you land Boogie Fland. But with him being in a lot more of an elevated role, he's going to be shooting a lot more. He showcased he can step out, hit the three. This past year, I'm really excited to see Tommy Howe play and rock out in Gainesville.
Definitely.
Definitely on my All-American watch for next year. So definitely be on the lookout for when those lists come out, when we make a video about that. But I think now is a good time just touch on two guys really quick who kind of are dominating the talks surrounding the transfer portal right now, aside from the draft deadline decision guys. Those guys being Des Claude and Dame Sarr. Dame Sarr is coming over. I believe he should have what would be a freshman's eligibility. He's coming over from Italy, where he played professionally there for a few years. But I think it's going to start with Des Claude. Really interesting situation there. He left a chance to make up a part of what would have been a really dynamic backcourt out in Southern California with Rodney Rice, and what would have been Chad Baker Mazara, but I'm sure they used some of Des Claude's money to pay Baker Mazara. But yeah, I mean, I think that would have been a really decent Trojan program this upcoming year. But of course, Des Claude hit the portal. I know Florida was kind of the big name for a long time, but they pulled out just because I didn't think they wanted to come up and meet the number that Des Claude was asking for. But if we're being honest, Desmond Claude's a really good player. He's played in the Big East, played in the Big Ten. Dynamic scorer. I do have a little bit of worry if he's kind of your go-to guy, where he kind of tends to just always go downhill and get into a little bit of an 8 to 10 foot floater a lot. Needs to showcase a little bit more consistency from the 3-point jump shot, but he definitely has proven that he can do it at certain points throughout his career. But again, he's a really good player. He's going to command a lot of money in NIL. And there's a lot of programs to which I could see going after him really heavy. I know Tennessee's probably one. I think Josh mentioned to me Gonzaga, which I love the fit of Gonzaga. I think he just seems like a Gonzaga player to me. If we're going off the jersey fit test, where I'm just basing my predictions off of where I think what uniform I can imagine player wearing. I could see Des Claude in a Gonzaga uniform. But I do like the fit there because you're running it back with Graham Ike. At least Mark Few is, and that's a team that really hasn't done all too much in the portal. It needs to replace a lot between Nembhard, Khalif Battle, Hickman, and Des Claude would definitely be a good get for them.
Yeah, no, I mean Claude, I think would be a zag over anything else right now. He is visiting Alabama supposedly, so great place to a lot
I
of
like the
open
fit there
roster
too.
spots in Tuscaloosa for Nate Oates. I think if he wants to have that older position role, he'd work in probably with a guy like Jalil Bethea, who transferred from Miami. I don't know if he's going to make a big leap like that. I think it's better to stay on the West Coast. But yeah, he's kind of an interesting scenario because he should have committed by now. Honestly,
Right.
It's once again just him trying to get as big of a bag as you want. It's like PJ Haggerty, who is very likely going to North Carolina State, but he probably should have committed last week, last month. I mean, whenever he really left. in Memphis into the portal he should have committed. It's just kind of trying to bargain around, and that never really works out. It's just not really worth it because you're the player. It's really like there's only so much you can do. Um, that said, I mean, there's no real shame of him trying to. He is a good player. I would have liked if he stayed at USC. I think Musselman is having a great rebound season from his first
Almost
year
definitely.
out. I mean, I mean, he can definitely build a solid squad, which he has getting Chad Baker-Mazar, which is still a surprise for me that he even left Auburn to go to USC. But yeah, I think Gonzaga is probably the best choice if he does choose to go there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I actually do like the Alabama fit a lot if he does end up choosing Tuscaloosa. But I think if I'm him, I choose the Zags. I really do like the fit there. I think he'll play great for Mark Few. But to get into the next guy, which is also kind of a little bit of a segment we want to get into, just talking about how many international players are coming over to the ranks of college basketball. Really is fascinating to see how it started to kind of unfold, especially over the last 2 years, but going back to last offseason and now this one. You look at Illinois, they got the Balkan Five, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. But that guy being Dame Sarr, who I just previously referred to, um, coming over from Italy, played professionally there for a few years. He is the uncle of Alex Sarr, which me and Josh both found out for the first time today. So really interesting fun fact for you there. But he's definitely a guy who's really, really talented. I know he's demanding a big number NIL wise. One, because Illinois didn't want to come up to that number already. I think one, they were kind of trying to hold out to see what the deal was going to be with what's his name, kid from coming over from Cal.
Oh, oh, um, I'm blanking on it too.
Yeah, I know. I don't know how. It'll come back. It'll come back. But regardless, yeah, I think they want us to hold out money for him. I really cannot believe I'm blanking on the name right now. But of course, they didn't want to come to the number for him. I know Kansas, who really hasn't made any moves at all whatsoever in the portal this cycle. I know they're getting Darren Peterson, so Dame Sarr and Darren Peterson would be a very deadly freshman duo to pair with out there in Lawrence, Kansas. No, Duke is in talks with Dame Sarr, which I think would definitely be good for them, especially if they don't get Cedric Coward back. If I'm being honest, I probably like the Kansas fit like the more than I like the Duke fit, just because I think Darren Pearson is obviously a guard. Dame Sarr is more of a wing, kind of 3-4 type of guy. There's already Cam Boozer out in Durham, and I just think could get a little tricky there with minutes wise. And if they get Cedric Coward back, I definitely don't think you go to Duke. But yeah, I like the Kansas fit the most, if I'm being honest, especially considering I want, not necessarily a Kansas supporter or anything of that sort, but I do. The basketball is better when Kansas is competitive, and don't want to see Kansas miss the tournament or be non-competitive, kind of like they were this year. I would very much like to see Darren Peterson and Dame Sarr play together. I think that would be a great tandem of freshmen to have. And yeah, I mean, Bill Self needs a big bounce back year. Landing Dame Sarr would be a step in that direction.
Yeah, no, I mean, I honestly like it a lot as well. And keep in mind this, POV, your Bill Self, you've just come off of two of your worst seasons ever in Kansas. And there are talks right now that him retiring and him being in a bit of a hot seat. One more season that's like this, and you're in that hot seat moment, which you don't want to be. Bill Silva's had easily a Hall of Fame career. You don't want to see his career end in a bad spot like this, per se. And you want to give a guy who very likely, like Derek Peterson, is very likely going to be the number one overall pick in the 2026 draft class. He looks very good. I don't think he's going to be like a Cooper Flag, obviously, but he's a really good player. I can't say
Yeah.
anything else to that. And when does Kansas get the number one overall pick? That's not really a common thing for them. You want to give the guy a lot of protection around him. And Sarr obviously wants to get into drafts. conversations for 2026 as well. Obviously, his family has had, Alex Sarr. They have Alex Sarr actually a brother in the G League, funnily enough. So they have the connections. So there's an open gateway. And going to Kansas probably makes things a lot easier. I mean, Duke would do the same thing too, but I think that'd be a really fun duo to watch. I kind of agree with you, and it's probably the best choice. I mean, Duke has a lot of open roster space as well. But I don't really know. I would also lean towards Kansas if that's what he's choosing right now in his options.
Yeah, I mean, I really do deep down believe Kansas is by far the better fit than Duke. I forget off the top of my head whether schools are potentially in the running for him. I think Kentucky was at one point, but I mean, who isn't Kentucky in the running for? And I think good segment, good segue here to kind of get back to the theme of international players coming over. Andrei Stojakovic, that's who it was. Great place to start, I think, is the Illinois Balkan Five. They do have five guys, European players who are good enough to be starters. I don't think they have a full five of European starters, just considering Kylan Boswell is running back in Champaign for another season. But I mean, you look at this roster makeup next going to next year. I mean, you got to give Brad Underwood all the credit in the world. He really is going all in on trusting these European players. You saw what happened last year with Kasparis Jakubonis, 2 years before with I don't know what's up with me forgetting Illinois players' names, but the one guy who played 2 years back, I'll have to come back.
Visage?
Yeah, no, not a Visage, but yeah, they got the two Visage brothers now. So really cool that those guys are gonna be playing with each other. Marcus Damask, that's who I'm thinking of. Of course, I don't know how I forgot that either, but yeah, I mean, last 2 years you had Marcus Damask, Kasparis Jakubonis. This past year you have the older Visage brother. Now you have Big Z coming over. I guess Zavonimir. I think that's how you say it. If not, I apologize. But on top of that, you're adding Mihailo Petrovic. Again, sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. But yeah, you're probably gonna have the Visage brothers starting next to each other at the 5 and the 4. So that's gonna be really fun to watch. I think Big Z has a chance to make a big jump this year. I really do. Now, kind of being out of the Cal system that really favors guard play. And, Illinois, Brad Underwood lets guys rock out. That's what he did with Terrence Shannon, likes of him. Coleman Hawkins, Marcus Damask did this past year with Kasparis and Kylan Boswell. Kylan Boswell, I think, is going to be really important as a leader this year. You also bring back Ty Rogers, you get Ty Rogers, who, again, big get for them. And I mean, yeah, I really do like how this Illini roster is shaping out to be. And it really is interesting to see a lot of teams prioritize recruiting overseas rather than what's in country. I mean, what's here at home in the U.S.
Yeah, no, I mean, the international prospect system is really starting to turn out. I think it's really a nice gateway place because, keep in mind, the NBA has had a really, really hard time when it comes to choosing international prospects. We've seen this, very recently with like last year's draft, how there were so many French prospects that haven't really panned out too well that have been top, draft picks that maybe looking back on should not have been considered for those roles. But even further back, Doncic was the third overall pick. He was drafted behind Marvin Bagley from that draft, which obviously that's such a bad choice, but you didn't really know how he was going to perform considering he might have been the only person in that entire league in Slovenia that could have been drafted that year. Jokic was drafted in the second round. Giannis was a late lottery pick, if even. I think that there's definitely a far smarter choice, both for NBA and college teams, to make in bringing in these international talents from not just Europe, but also from Africa that, because unfortunately the NBA Prospect League in Africa hasn't really panned out. I mean, I know Kaman Malawak has made success in that, but obviously he went to Duke. He didn't just skip and go straight to the NBA, which hasn't really panned out. Like I definitely see the opportunities there, and I like what Illinois is doing. They're definitely going to be at the start of it. I mean, The only actual college player on that list, other than Avicic, was the youngest, Andreas Yakovic, who went to Stanford, then went to Cal, and is coming to the Big Ten. So a little bit of a change for him. I think it's a more contact based game, which I don't know if he's ready for, but I think he can definitely be a top 5 player in the Big Ten. And I forgot the other two. I'm sure someone can correct me in the comments on who would fit that role. But
Are you talking about Petrovic?
yeah, Petrovich. Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking. Like I mean, and then besides that, you still have Killian Boswell. So Brad Underwood's cooking as he always is, and we're talking about Dame Sarr. We're talking about Purdue picked up another great transfer from the Israeli league. Like there's just an overall growth in just general international, I like just prospects in general, and it's not just from Europe. I mean, I have there's the Jacob Furphy from Australia. The younger Furphy. If you remember, he's considering coming into college for this upcoming season. Um, David Merkovich from the Montenegrin League, if you're following from outside. Like, there's just a lot of open talent, which just adds to the sport. You want to have more talent in college basketball. It allows for more growth, more development, and a better transition. I don't really know how the Slovenian or Serbian or Montenegrin leagues compared to college basketball or the NBA, but I bet Jokic never really played with an NBA caliber player until he stepped on the court in Denver. He never
Right.
really had those opportunities. College basketball gives it to these players, which is why we're seeing this explosion, which is amazing. I honestly like it a lot.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I mean, I really do love seeing the talent from overseas come over to play in the U.S. in college. Off recording, me and Josh had a conversation about what we thought in terms of what that does for those European players' developments. I was kind of in the boat where I said maybe I don't think it necessarily helps the personal skill development of the European guys themselves and how they improve as players. But I do think it kind of gives them a jump start to adapting to the style of play, which is what we see here in the U.S. in terms of the really up tempo, the athletes on the court. Because I really don't think you see the athletes out in Europe to the liking that you see here in the U.S., where I mean everyone on the court can dunk, everyone is super fast, athletic, lengthy, and I definitely think that kind of again prepares them for what they're going to see in the NBA if they're good enough to make it that far. But again, I really do like seeing the talent that comes over from overseas. It definitely brings a new dimension and another reason to watch the sport that we already love so much. And it's going to definitely dictate how teams construct their rosters going forward. I mean, if this continues to kind of work out the way it kind of has for a lot of programs over the last few years, then I don't see why teams won't continue to pluck guys out from across, overseas and whatnot. But I'm definitely excited to see how that continues to unfold in the landscape of college basketball. I mean, it is still kind of in the very early phases of it. We're really kind of starting to see kind of kick up into high gear this off season. But again, I'm all for it. I don't have anything against it. I definitely like to see these guys from overseas come over and show that they can hoop out here in the U.S. too. But I think that pretty much takes care of everything we had to cover for this episode today. Again, number one thing right now, these draft deadline decisions are going to be huge and really going to dictate who's going to be how good in this upcoming season. I mean, a lot of these guys could be going back to programs who could be elevated into a top 5, top 10 position in the preseason poll if they do come back to school. And again, they're just going to bring so much more energy and excitement to the sport next year. So I'm definitely hoping that the guys who I think should come back do come back. And that's not to slight anyone who stays in the draft. I loved watching them play too. But I think if it's the right move, stay in the draft. If I said it was the right move to come back to school, I think you should come back to school. But again, really excited for this upcoming season. I think it's going to be loaded. Already got a lot of the top teams playing each other. They've announced their out of conference schedules. So really excited for that too. I'm sure we'll make a video about that at some point. But please, as always, engage with our content any way you can. If you like this podcast or anything else you see on this channel, please do whatever you can in terms of either just liking the video, subscribing to our channel, or telling other people about it. Really does help with being able to pump this content out to more people. And until the next episode we put out to you guys, we'll see you all next time.